De-dollarization and the end of American hegemony. Hello, welcome to Geopolitics Demystified. I'm your host, S.L. Canton. We bring in perspectives that you do not see or hear in the mainstream media. Today's topic is de-dollarization. The most important pillar that holds up the American empire is the US dollar. This underpins not only America's prosperity and military, but also its economic and geopolitical power over other nations and leaders. Without the exorbitant privilege of the US dollar and the global financial system that is controlled by the West, the US empire will collapse. This is why de-dollarization is the mother of all geopolitical phenomenon and a crucial topic. Weaken the dollar's hegemony, you have neutralized America's unipolar prowess. Let's discuss. De-dollarization is about decoupling from the US dollar, which was established as the primary global currency after World War II. Actually, the agreement was struck at the Bretton Woods conference in 1944, a year before the end of World War II. Interestingly, the dollar almost died in 1971 when the US went off the gold standard and defaulted on its obligations. However, the dollar was brought back to life when a deal with Saudi Arabia created the petrodollar, i.e., US dollar backed by Saudi oil. This has led to the primacy of the so-called king dollar. Now, all commodities around the world are pretty much priced in US dollar, and countries buy and sell goods and services mostly in dollar. In order to trade in the global market, countries are forced to accumulate US dollar in their foreign exchange reserves. This creates an artificial demand for the dollar, which is why the US can borrow and print trillions of dollars without the dollar losing its value. Thus, America enjoys lavish lifestyle through enormous trade deficit and budget deficit every year, while other countries must work hard and be fiscally responsible. The dollar also gives the US enormous geopolitical power. Why? If a country refuses to obey American diktats, the US can impose sanctions, seize its assets in US banks, and prevent the country from trading with others. Thus, the US can unilaterally wreck another country's economy. This is an undemocratic and a tyrannical system which exists solely because of the special status of the US dollar. These are the reasons why countries are trying to decouple from the dollar and the US-controlled financial system such as the SWIFT. Why de-dollarization? Now, let's discuss the other explicit benefits of de-dollarization, i.e., when countries no longer depend on US dollar to conduct trade, investments, and other financial transactions. Number 1, sovereignty. With de-dollarization, developing countries no longer have to let the US dictate their domestic and foreign policies. This means freedom from fear of sanctions that bully countries, corporations, politicians, and individuals. Number 2, an America with diminished ability to print dollars. No more trillions of dollars created out of thin air while the USD stays strong. When de-dollarization reaches a certain threshold, the US will be forced to play by the same rule as others. This means fewer US military bases around the world, fewer US-funded NGOs that start color revolutions, fewer politicians being bribed around the world, and so on. Basically, a less corrupt world and more free market and free elections. Next, free trade. With de-dollarization, Anyone can trade anything with anyone else without Uncle Sam's permission or threats. Same for investments. Freedom from dollar won't just help countries like Cuba, Venezuela, and North Korea, but everyone. For example, if India wants to build a seaport in Iran or buy oil from Russia, it can be done without begging the US for permission. The world's GDP will literally go up due to de-dollarization. Next, cost savings. No middleman, i.e., US banks taking commissions. For example, when China wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, both countries must now use US banks to do the trade, and the American banks take a commission for their so-called work. So such commissions will be gone with de-dollarization. Next, privacy. Using US banks and SWIFT mean that the US gets to spy on everyone and monitor all their transactions. By circumventing this system, countries gain more privacy and freedom. Next, save time. Faster transactions in local currencies. No American banks needed. Next, less exploitation of developing nations. The US dollar hegemony means that every country needs US dollar to survive. This artificial demand gives the US enormous power and makes the dollar strong. Thus, people in Mexico, China, Vietnam, India, Bangladesh, Africa, etc. are forced to work for $1 or a few pennies per hour to make products that are sold for hundreds or thousands of dollars by American and European corporations. Such exploitation will be gone. Next, boost in global e-commerce and tourism. Way more options than under the current dollar regime. So think of anyone buying anything online from wherever in the world with just a few clicks without having to go through all these bureaucratic and the dollar set restrictions. Next, debt trap gone. Far less debt trap and exploitation by Western countries and institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. External debts in US dollar are one of the primary tools used to impose austerity and privatization on developing countries. Look what's happening right now in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Argentina, Egypt, etc. This exploitation has been going on for decades. Next, less need for Forex. The entire concept of foreign exchange reserves will become less relevant since more trade will be done in local currencies. Dollar, euro, and yuan will likely be the three leading but equal choices as reserve currencies. There might also be a BRICS currency if they manage to implement it wisely. No one country or region, say USA, Europe, or China, can bully others in this new world of de-dollarization. Stability. The US dollar is also used to destroy currencies of other countries for political and economic reasons, as we are seeing in, say, Turkey, where the lira has lost more than 50% of its value in the last 2 years as the US tried to carry out a regime change by disrupting the economy and getting rid of Erdogan. Sometimes the destruction of the economies of developing nations is not even intentional. For example, over the last 2 years, the Federal Reserve Bank in the US has raised the rates by 5 percentage points, or 500 basis points. This made the dollar very strong while crushing other currencies. Thus, to protect their falling currencies, developing countries are then forced to sell off their hard-earned foreign exchange dollars. In Asia alone, developing countries lost $200 billion in this process in 2022 and 2023. Next, true democracy. Multi-currency, multi-lenders, multi-partners, all these choices mean democratization of global finance. Next, no more monopoly, no more hegemony. A multipolar and more just world will arise out of de-dollarization. De-dollarization movement. By the way, de-dollarization is already spreading like wildfire. Consider these examples. The BRICS group is poised to announce its own either gold or commodity-backed currency during its summit in October this year. The BRICS currency, if properly implemented, will be a game changer. Note that it will not be like the euro, which replaced the currencies of individual countries. In contrast, the BRICS currency will be used only for trade while preserving the sovereign currencies of its members. How about internationalization of Chinese yuan? For the first time, China bought natural gas in yuan. Hello, Petroyuan. Watch out, petrodollar. India just signed a deal with Malaysia to enable trade in Indian rupees. And India is working with 18 other countries to do trade in rupees. These include not only neighbors like Bangladesh and developing countries in Africa, but also some staunch allies like Germany, UK, and New Zealand. India is also in talks with the UAE to buy oil for rupee. Petro rupee, who would have thunk? Next, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and Thailand now have a digital payment system that enables settlements in local currencies. They have even standardized the QR code payments. No need for the dollar middleman anymore. Now, all 10 ASEAN countries with 600 million people want to adopt the system and eliminate the use of foreign currencies such as US dollar and Japanese yen in the intra-ASEAN trade. For the first time, China just bought liquefied natural gas from the UAE using Chinese yuan. Kind of a shocking news that should really be on the front page of CNN and BBC. Already, more than half of China's trade and cross-border payments are happening in yuan. Imagine that. Just a decade ago or so, the share of yuan was only about 10%, and now is already more than 50%. Kenya's president announced that Saudi Arabia and the UAE will sell oil for Kenyan shilling. Ghana is buying oil in gold. These are examples of true freedom for African countries. Kenya and Iraq have also made it possible for people and businesses to buy things on Alibaba, the Chinese e-commerce giant, with yuan. No need for US dollar in a globalized high-tech world. Egypt has joined the BRICS Bank, the new development bank. Who needs the predatory IMF and the World Bank, who anyway hate giving out loans for infrastructure projects and real development? Egypt is also issuing bonds that are denominated in renminbi. That's the Chinese currency. Indonesia's President Jokowi has told his people to stop using Visa and MasterCard. And the reason he gave? How the US confiscated Russia's foreign exchange reserves. During his visit to China, the Malaysian Prime Minister Ibrahim proposed an Asian monetary fund to rival the IMF and to reduce dependence on US dollar. By the way, the new head of BRICS Bank is none other than Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil. She was spied on by the NSA, the US spying agency. Later, the US staged a soft coup and removed her from the office by leaking a recorded conversation. Now she lives in China and manages the BRICS Bank, or the New Development Bank. Her influence helped, or we will hope, that will bring Brazil into BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. Brazil, which is the largest economy in Latin America, is now enabling yuan payments for Brazilian exporters. No more dollar, thank you. As a sign of things to come, the transactions will go through SIPS, the Chinese version of SWIFT. This is a complete decoupling from the post-World War II financial world order. Consider that 40 plus countries have established a currency swap agreement with China. Looking at other global trends, where to begin? There has been an overload of news regarding tectonic geopolitical changes from all over the world. There are outbreaks of peace between intense geopolitical rivals, which would have been unthinkable before. Developing countries are suddenly breaking free from the clutches of a rigged global financial system, and a new world order is emerging at an astonishing pace. Let's take a look at the astounding developments that presage an epochal realignment of geopolitics and geoeconomics. We can break down the other historic events into two categories. One, peace movement. In an earth-shattering move, Saudi Arabia and Iran agreed to establish diplomatic ties brokered by China. Saudi Arabia and Iran have also joined BRICS. Next, Syria's President Assad visited the UAE and attended the Arab Summit, an equally astounding rapprochement. The third one is about the former Taiwanese president who visited mainland China, an unprecedented event since the Chinese Civil War ended in 1949. All these are terrible for America's power, which rests upon chaos, wars, and divide and rule. The second big phenomenon is the revolt against American hegemony. There is a global revolt against the American empire. Check out these recent rebellious events. BRICS expansion. 5 countries joined last year, including the very strategic Saudi Arabia, UAE, Iran, and Egypt. 30 more countries have applied for BRICS membership this year. We will find out the details in October when the BRICS summit happens in Russia. Mexico is not a colony of the USA, thundered Mexican President AMLO last year on the 85th anniversary of Mexico's nationalization of oil. This progressive leader nationalized lithium to the great displeasure of his northern big brother. Similarly, El Salvador's young and dynamic president, Bukele, warned the U.S. that Monroe Doctrine is dead. Bukele has cracked down on violent gangs and drug trafficking, which may have disrupted the CIA's revenue. Another Latin American country, Honduras, dumped Taiwan and recognized the People's Republic of China as the real China. Heck, even some German leaders are talking about fixing the Nord Stream pipeline and renewing trade with Russia. And how about Putin? the supposedly international pariah who's under 10,000 US and Europe sanctions. Recently, 40 plus African countries sent representatives to Moscow to attend a conference titled Africa and Russia in a Multipolar World. That's not subtle at all. Last year, Xi Jinping visited Moscow for a 3-day visit and said that changes unseen in a century are happening, and we, Russia and China, are leading this. Then, a few days ago, Russian President Putin visited China on a state visit, received a royal welcome, and cemented the alliance with China. Then there is Putin, who essentially heralded the death of petrodollar and the birth of Petroyuan by making these 2 points. Already, 90% of Russia-China trade is happening in yuan and rubles. Furthermore, Russia will use the Chinese yuan to trade with Asia, Africa, and Latin America whenever possible. Then there are other profound changes. Russia using yuan as the main currency in foreign exchange reserves. Russian companies issuing renminbi bonds, and Russian banks allowing people to open yuan accounts, and so on. USA in denial. Americans are in for a rude awakening. The mainstream media, pundits, and politicians are still engaging in bravado about the supremacy of the US dollar. However, events can unfold like an avalanche. Meanwhile, Americans are not only in denial about de-dollarization, but also its impact on the dollar's global reserve currency status. Here's the simple truth. If people don't need dollar for trade, they don't need dollar in the foreign exchange reserves either. In the near future, technology and multi-currency trade will turn the whole concept of reserve currencies into an archaic and colonialist notion. Dollar itself won't just disappear, but its hegemony will be gone. The US dollar will become just one among major currencies, such as the euro and Chinese yuan. In the old world order, if you run out of US dollars, you must go begging to the IMF, which will impose austerity and privatization, i.e., let Western corporations plunder your country. However, in the New World Order, you just buy oil and other commodities, mostly in your local currency, or use another option like the RMB, which is the Chinese renminbi. Also, if you are a developing nation, China will not only give you the money, but will build the infrastructure you need. Who is going to build, say, highways, railways, airports, seaports, and so on? Not the US. Only China will do that. The big kahuna in this radical transformation is, of course, Saudi Arabia, the most influential Arab country and the de facto leader of OPEC. Saudi Prince MBS is a visionary and shrewd person who understands geopolitics. Consider that public schools in Saudi Arabia are now teaching Chinese language. It's mandatory now. And Prince MBS is making all sorts of long-term deals with China. For his $1 trillion futuristic city, known as NEOM, he is getting yuan-denominated loans from Chinese banks. And Saudi Aramco signed a $12 billion deal to build refineries in China. In the future, Saudis can more quickly export petroleum products to other Asian countries. The Saudi-Iran deal is also a geopolitical coup de grace for China. It may very well be the cornerstone for Petroyuan, i.e., oil being sold for Chinese RMB. And they could do this not just for China, but even for other countries. Obviously, this détente paved the way for both Saudi Arabia and Iran to join BRICS. Imagine a BRICS Plus with three oil giants, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, and perhaps even Venezuela and Nigeria in the future. The BRICS Plus can account for 40 to 50% of world's oil production. How hard will it be to create a new currency that's backed by oil, or even a combination of commodities, say oil, natural gas, wheat, and other metals, like maybe even lithium? Remember that Russia and Iran are number one and number two in natural gas reserves of the world. Thus, there are endless possibilities in a multipolar world. How long before the de-dollarization stories are replicated worldwide? This is just a matter of scaling that needs the right governance and technology. Imagine a future when any person in any country can directly and instantly trade with anyone in the world. All the US sanctions and bullying will become meaningless. Already, look how most of the world is ignoring the US-EU sanctions on Russia. The proof is in the pudding. Look at how Russia's exports of crude oil, petroleum products, natural gas, and coal have been virtually unaffected by US-EU sanctions. The message from the global south to the imperialists about the Ukraine war is clear. Your monkey, your circus. Even the EU is still indirectly buying LNG from Russia. For oil, the EU is just fooling the world by buying Russian oil through India and Turkey. Similarly, China's Belt and Road Initiative has great potential to transform the world. With 147 members, the BRI is a transformative paradigm. Hopefully, some European countries will also grow spines, reject the life as American vassals, and embrace the Belt and Road Initiative and a cooperative world. All the propaganda about debt traps and failures of projects in BRI are cynical and either exaggerated or blatantly false. If these holier-than-thou people are so concerned about debt trap, they should join the BRI, propose reforms, and offer cheaper loans. Peace and development. Poor countries have enormous challenges with the basics and are caught in a catch-22. To get out of poverty, they need to build infrastructure. But to build infrastructure, they need money. These countries suffer when there are endless and perpetual wars that disrupt global supply chains and trade. Plus, Western institutions do not give loans for infrastructure. If you want a loan for U.S. military base or U.S. weapon, yes, the U.S. will gladly lend you money. But if you want money to build hydropower dams and internet connections, no. The Middle East, for example, has so much wealth, but many Arab countries are poor and or destroyed by wars. This is why peace between Saudi Arabia, Iran, Syria, and the UAE is a game changer. The leaders are finally realizing how much more they can accomplish through cooperation. It's as if there is a spiritual awakening. The only ones to benefit from conflicts are the US and the EU. Divide Sunnis and Shiites, Arabs and Persians. The US and Israel get to be the hegemon of this pivotal region. Plus, keeping Iran down helps US EU companies make enormous profits in oil and gas. Of course, selling weapons is also a big industry in the US. Needless to say, what's happening in the Middle East is amazing. After decades of brutal civil wars, proxy wars, and religious wars, Arab leaders are having an epiphany. Hey, how about we cooperate with one another and find win-win deals for peace and prosperity? This process, however, is not easy, as we are seeing with the Israeli war on Gaza and the attacks on Iran. The death of the Iranian president in the helicopter crash may be related to these geopolitical events. We will find out the truth. Thus, this peace process requires enormous diplomacy and strategic patience. However, the dividends of peace and development will be astronomical, and they can lay the framework for other countries to resolve their issues as well. Imagine peace between North and South Korea, India and China, India and Pakistan, China and Japan, Russia and Europe. It'll be fantastic for the world. One final note. The Saudi-Iran peace deal is also a proof of China's growing geopolitical clout and mastery. China is not just a workshop of the world anymore. Who knows? Maybe the Chinese will play a great role in ending the Ukraine war as well. Arrogance and ignorance. The hubris and ignorance in Washington, London, Brussels bubbles are astounding. On one hand, the US sanctions, weaponization of the dollar, and warmongering are accelerating the death of dollar hegemony, which underpins American power and prosperity. On the other hand, the Europeans are meekly accepting their vassal state and sacrificing their economy, security, and potentially their lives as geopolitical pawns in the proxy war against Russia. Moreover, the US-EU financial systems have become Ponzi schemes on top of unsustainable debt and mind-boggling derivatives, which is in the order of thousands of trillions of dollars. Meanwhile, the deindustrialized Western economies can't even supply Ukraine with enough ammunition. The American economy is a fugazi, as they say in that movie Wall Street. Financial capitalism with fake wealth created by printing trillions of dollars and hiding failures with bailouts, aka socialism for oligarchs and banksters. All these are possible only because of the rigged global financial system. Conclusion. The American empire is based on three things: dollar, military, and divide and rule. And all these three pillars of the matrix are crumbling in real time. The end. Thank you.